Sylvia, are you on the line?
I
there
am.
you are. You're FaceTiming. I thought you were going to be driving.
I was driving, but actually we got a little bit of a late start because both of us got into Greensboro, myself and my player, really, really late, or actually early this morning. So I am in the home clubhouse of the Greensboro Grasshoppers.
Oh, that's great. So is Greensboro just like the movie with the Green Book?
Well, I saw about 3 blocks of Greensboro when I got off the train at 2:00 this morning, and I've been at my player's apartment and at the ballpark. So I really didn't see anything.
Okay, so
I can't
Sylvia,
contribute on that front. Sorry.
Funny anecdote for me. I have a Greensboro Grasshoppers T-shirt. I'll wear it next time on the show.
Okay, awesome. So Sylvia, thank you for being here with us, and I want you to talk to us about yourself, Latina in Major League Baseball, repping players, all that.
Well, it's funny. I spent a really long time at Major League Baseball in the commissioner's office, and I tell people 100 years because if I tell them the exact number, they do the math and they look at me and they're like, "Wow, she's freaking old." So I try to just say, a Cuban 1,000 years, and that just kind of works for me. So on this side, it's kind of funny because I had wanted to be an agent way back when, and I wouldn't have been able to be the same kind of agent then that I could be now. It's totally different. It's a different kind of street cred. The relationships that I have throughout the game are really different.
What did you learn most that is helping you be the agent you are?
Follow up. Make sure when you say you're going to do something, you do it. Always, closing the circle. Like when you talk to people, if somebody's expecting you to get back to them, even if you don't have the answer, get back to them and tell them, you know what, I'm not sure. But making sure to close those circles because relationships are everything.
It's funny that you say that because, those are conversations that I've had with players when they're thinking about changing agents. And one of the major things is that they didn't follow up with me. They weren't present. They weren't, interested in knowing what I was doing or what event I was having next. So they are very attentive to that. And that's what we expect from an agent. We expect them to be interested in and just wanting to know where we're at as players, right? So yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that.
Oh yeah, they that's big, and for me that's big too. Communications with my players because I don't want to find out stuff from somewhere else. I had a player actually last year got promoted, and I said, "Hey," I called him. I said, "Is there something you want to tell me?" He's like, "Well, yeah, I was about to call you, but how do you know?" And I said, "Your dad posted it on Facebook." So I was like, "Yeah, okay, I can't be finding stuff out on the street, so please let me know." But yeah, that's huge. In fact, Ryan, the player that I'm here with, it's interesting. He had talked to. I got Ryan because one of his teammates was one of my players already, and he told me he had talked to somebody else. Kind of thought he was going to go with somebody else, and he said, the guy said he was going to send me a contract. He said he was going to get back to me, and like a month went by, and he said, and he didn't talk to me. So he said, I really appreciated our conversation. So I'd really like to work with you if that's okay. I said, sure. And that's huge.
That's great.
Yeah,
that is really great.
And just for the people out there that don't understand or think that agent-player relationship is all contracts, tell us what you're doing in Greensboro.
Yes, that's an interesting story. And I've been told by some people I'm a little bit crazy. I may be a little bit overboard as an agent. But so Ryan Haug, who's with the Pittsburgh Pirates, broke his hand the other night. He was having a great game, broke his hand, and he told me he had just paid a ton of money to ship his car up from Arizona. And they told him he's going to be rehabbing in Bradenton. So he's like, okay, I'm going to drive my car to Bradenton. I said, you are not driving your stick shift car 11 hours from North Carolina to Florida. I said, I'm coming. He's like, okay. And even this morning, so I got on a train. I made it a little bit of a road trip with my daughter who's off from school. And I said, well, you've never been on a train. Come on, let's go. So we took the train down here, and we are driving down. And in fact, even this morning, he was trying to pack up his apartment, not sure when he's coming back. So I said, well, you know how long you think it'll take? And he goes, well, you know, I don't know, with one hand. And I said, how about we come over, we help you pack? He goes, okay.
Was he too afraid to ask for help, I guess?
Yeah, he doesn't. He's a catcher, and that's not what he does. It's who he is. So he's not a guy who asks for help. He's not a guy who's needy. He just does. But
Now,
yeah,
I'm sorry, Sylvia.
Yeah.
A little bit about your beginnings, because being a woman in baseball, and as far as an agent, it's not something that we see on the regular. And I know that you wanted to be, what was it, a GM?
I wanted to be, yeah. I thought I was going to be GM of the Mets when I was a kid, and that was my plan. And you know, the first time I thought that Ron Gardenhire was the second coming of Ozzie Smith, they would have fired my butt. I would have had to find a job. But that's you know what I had planned. And I ended up in the commissioner's office for a long time, dealing with player development. So I had a lot of relationships with clubs, dealt regularly with major league clubs, minor league clubs, and it just, for whatever reason, I didn't end up at a club. It just, the opportunity didn't necessarily come. And but I ended up thinking, you know what, it was time. I had been at the commissioner's office a long time. It's time to look for something new. And I said, well, you know what? I always thought I was going to be an agent, and I think maybe now's the right time for that.
Wow, that's
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. What was the hardest part about the transition?
The hardest part about the transition, well, it's funny. I was not an entrepreneur. A lot of people are very hell-bent on, I want to own my own business. I want to be my own boss. That wasn't me. I was like, look, I'll be oppressed by the man, but the man takes the responsibility. Like, you know, I don't have risk. I don't have, you know, I'm like, that's not about me. And then I said, well, no, this is the way I want to do it. And then when I came up with my own concept of how I wanted to be an agent, and then I was like, you know what? I don't want to go work for a big agency. And friends of mine, a lot of farm director and GM friends of mine were telling me, I wish you would go somewhere so you'd have a check every 2 weeks. And I said, look, if I go there, I have to become one of them. And I want to be me. And I think my players are best going to appreciate what I give them personally. Mm-hmm. And so that was a big adjustment. Figuring out where to find players was an adjustment, but a little bit less than I thought, because before I knew it, I had friends everywhere that were recommending me players. I mean, I've had people call me and say, hey, there's a kid in Boston. Okay. So I get in my car, I go to Boston. I see this kid. Yeah, I think he's going to be good. No, he's not, you know. And then somebody will call me and say, hey, I've got a player here. So now my original thought was I'd have players kind of between Boston and Baltimore, which is a close road trip from my house in New Jersey, and Miami, which is where my mom lives, because I'm Cuban and we all have to end up there eventually. So that was kind of my plan. And then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, I've got players in Oklahoma. So last week I was in the DR. I'm now in Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm going to Oklahoma next Friday. And then I have to somewhere figure out how to get to California in the next 3 weeks, because somebody introduced me to a kid out there who wants me to represent him, and he's draft eligible this year.
Jose on Facebook says Sylvia's awesomeness, girl power is amazing. So she's a big fan. Or he's a big fan, excuse me.
So speaking about girl power, did you ever feel like you needed to work, you know, double as hard as all the other men were in this specific industry, or did you feel like right at home?
Double? Come on, that's a little bit of an underestimate. It's got to be like 20 times.
Yeah.
It is. Now, the good thing is I came in with an attitude that baseball was my life since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really feel, for a lot of the time, I didn't feel like I was necessarily working double, but I know, people have asked me, why don't you go to football? Have you thought about football or basketball or hockey? And I said, look, I love football. I love hockey, but baseball is my passion. I know I can run circles around people in baseball. Like they're not messing with me in baseball. Somebody was asking me the other day, they're like, well, something about Ozzie Smith and who is he? And this guy thought he was really stumping everybody. And you know who he was traded for? I'm like, Gary Templeton. Hello. Child's play. Like that's, I was always that obsessive about baseball. And I did, to some extent, yeah, I did feel, I had to know a lot more. I had to have a different kind of perspective. And luckily with my players, because everyone's been recommended to me by somebody they already knew, they're accepting my baseball knowledge too. So I'll talk to a guy and like, look, you're not finishing your pitches. You're not using your lower half. You need to stay back. You're coming open too quick. And they kind of like, at first they're like, what the hell? She really knows this girl. And then they're like, great. And then they want to tell everybody else. And then they're like, hey, check this out. Like, look at this.
Well, that's great because word of mouth is what usually, drives business.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Who was your first player that you repped, and what did you learn about that contract situation that maybe you've gotten better, or were you very comfortable in negotiating to begin with?
Well, I'll tell you, coming in on this side, and right now I've got minor leaguers and some, draft eligible high school or college kids that I'm advising, a couple of kids that were released from the minor leagues that we're trying to get back, because you can't jump in. People think, you jump in and, you've got Manny Machado. Like, that's not happening. That's, a several year buildup. My mom called me the other day and said, oh, Sylvie's not going to talk to us anymore because she, her player just signed for $430 million. And, I said, I got a guy from South Jersey, but it's not that one. So you have to really start to build from the bottom. And the first thing when I was first out on the streets and talking to players and talking to coaches and friends of mine who were either scouts or farm directors, GMs, former players, they would, a lot of people thought I was going to be a miracle worker. Oh, you know everybody, you have relationships with everybody. So here's this guy, he was released 3 years ago. Can you get him somewhere? And I was like, look, and my natural personality is to be a savior. And I want to save everybody and, make the world a better place. And, somehow emotionally, like I'm going to do wonderful things for people. This is in my head. Realizing, and it took a little bit to realize to really appreciate career-wise where people are and not take on cases that aren't realistic to get signed back into major league organizations. So that's what I really learned from the beginning. Really be judicious about which players you take. And I'm very adamant, especially now, if I don't believe a player can go to the big leagues 150%, then I won't represent them. Because
that's interesting. Yeah, and then it's good that you're very honest about that, because I'm sure that they'll appreciate that in the end. And then I'm also sure that as women, and I'm sure that you can relate, I'm not a mom, but I have motherly instincts, and I'm sure that that's something that helps you as well with these young men.
Oh yeah, they first of all, when I go to high school and college tournaments and showcases, they always assume I'm a mom. So I'm just sitting there. And I was talking one day to a scouting director, and he goes, I bet you get a lot of information that way. I said, yes, I do. So I sit there, and somebody, they'll ask me, oh, which kid is yours? And I try to pick out, I point out a Hispanic kid, a black kid, and a white kid, and they're all like 6'6", and they're like, kind of look at me like either you're all kinds of popular or I'm like, or something's different than you assumed. But they do. And some people, at first people were hesitant. They thought they were going to insult me, saying that it was something, that there was something maternal about a woman as an agent. I'm like, no, I got kids. I get it. And I am a mom. I am a mom. And my son actually, he's now 24. But we had joked, my ex-husband and I had joked that when we had a kid, we were going to make him a lefty. So we were going to have a Cuban lefty. He will quickly keep us in the manner to which we will quickly become accustomed to when he's pitching till he's 80. Well, we ended up, he got hit in the knee when he was like 11, never recovered. And now with my career change, he's like, so Mom, so you got other guys that are going to make the big leagues now, right? So like, I'm not an embarrassment anymore. Like, I'm not a disappointment. I go, you're good. You're fine.
Does he call them his brothers now?
Well, it's funny. He doesn't. He hasn't met as many of them as my daughter has. And what's especially funny is when I talk about them, because I'm always saying my kids. They're all young anyway, So I say, oh, my kid this. One time I was saying, I'll say, oh, I was going out with, I was going to meet for lunch with one of my kids' dads. And my friend goes, look, I know you're not together anymore, but you could call him by his name. And I'm like, no, not those kids. Not those kids. The ones that have gloves and bats and uniforms.
Now, Sylvia, being that you are working with a lot of your clients are minor league players, and they are blessed, one of the few who are blessed to have an agent. How do you see the change with what the Blue Jays did with increasing the pay and what allegedly Major League Baseball will be doing in that respect?
Well, wait a sec. First, I need to tell Ryan how blessed he is. He should know that by the fact that I am here in North Carolina. But Ryan, she just said you're blessed, so you know. So he's another part of the clubhouse backing up stuff. But the Blue Jays, that was something that even while I was at the commissioner's office, that was a big concern for me. Because like you said, the maternal instincts, and two, just the natural inclination to want to protect these kids who are, it's not glorious in the minor leagues. And when you're playing, it's even a bigger adjustment for the college kids, I think, because the ones that play at, Arizona where Ryan played, or big programs like USC and LSU, and Vanderbilt, those guys play there and they're almost big leaguers. And then they get to the minor leagues and it is a lot of bus travel, and the salaries were really tough. And I actually, when I was director of minor league operations at the commissioner's office, I was part of raising the salary level even to what it was now.
Wow.
Because it had been $850 a month for like 20 years. And we were like, oh my God, like, how do you even, and that's before taxes. They take taxes out of that.
They take taxes out of that?
They take taxes out of that. Yeah, they take taxes out of that. Now, but most kids are going to get them back because, you only get paid during the season. You only get paid that small amount. And we raised it from $850 to $1,100 for the minimum salary with the GM Player Development Committee, and the Farm Directors Committee. We voted on it. And it's not surprising that the Blue Jays are the one who did it, because the chair at that time of the GM Player Development Committee, when we raised it, even where we raised it to, was Mark Shapiro.
Comes full circle.
So now it comes full circle. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Now
so
we understand.
this is not new for him in being, concerned about these kind of things.
We have Ryan, or Jose on Facebook says Ryan is blessed.
I will make sure. I have 11 hours driving to Bradenton where we will be able to, really hit that home.
And then we have a Pirates fan commenting on Twitter that says, how is the Pirates organization, since you have obviously a couple players with them?
Yeah, I do. I got to say, I kind of wanted my players to be with the organizations that may not be considered to be, at the major league level, aren't necessarily all that. The ones
Sure.
that, you think of the perennial, I have a kid with the Red Sox, but it was kind of neat I almost wanted everybody to go to an organization that hasn't been successful as of late, because they're going to get more opportunity. Mm-hmm. So that's been really exciting. I have a player, Jack Herman, who was he was a Gulf Coast League All-Star last year, and he was named by Baseball America as one of the top 20 prospects in the Gulf Coast League, despite the fact that he was drafted in the 30th round. And I cannot wait until people talk about this kid and don't mention every single time how little he was paid as a bonus. But he is, between him and Ryan, what I really appreciate about the Pirates is that Ryan was a senior in college. He was, for some absurd reason, the backup catcher at Arizona. And when you see him throw, you're like, what the hell? Who's back? Who's playing ahead of this guy? And they really are giving him a big chance. As a senior sign, a lot of times guys get signed as seniors out of college, and they're there, and they maybe get a little playing time, and they're there for a year, and nobody really pays attention to him. But he's been getting really big opportunities. He backed up four big league spring training games. Of course, he got hit in 2 of them, which was not surprising because he led the Pac-12 in getting hit by pitches when he was in college. So he needs a lot of body armor. But they've been, one of the things that I really appreciate too is like they see somebody like Jack Herman who has a really pure swing, and they haven't messed with him. They haven't messed with him. He is now 19, but he came out of high school, and they're figuring out, they're just watching the player that they have in front of them. They're not trying to make everyone the same player.
Sylvia, La Esquina Caliente. I know where the name comes from, but you can tell me.
Okay. Well, first, I should probably mention my mom was like, La Esquina Caliente, eso es feo, eso no se puede. She had a whole other idea in her head, and I said, look, that is not, I was like, you're not in baseball, you don't get it. I was very adamant, I wanted a baseball term. And for those of you who don't know, Esquina Caliente means hot corner, for those of you who don't know. I wanted something that was in Spanish so that all the Latin guys would get it, but easy enough for the Americans to pronounce. Everybody figures out caliente right away, and if they don't know what esquina means, I said, turn it over, and there's a diamond with a star at third base. But the way it came was because there is, and then the other thing was that there is an area in in Parque Central in La Habana that is, you can always find people talking about baseball. And I wanted something that was very close, that was, I'm Cuban, and it was very emotional for me. That's, the reason I ended up picking it.
I was just about to say it in Spanish, but como cubana.
I know.
Como cubana. Can you talk to us about what's going on right now as far as the administration and then canceling the deal with Cuba?
Well, that I thought was very interesting because there has been, I know Yasiel Puig a little bit. I know some of these other players that came out, and it's harrowing what they went through. I mean, it was really horrible what they went through. I was a little surprised, actually, when Major League Baseball came out with the announcement that they were going to do, that they had this agreement, because there is no secret. A lot of people seem to think now, okay, the Kardashians can go to Cuba, so now, hey, great, everything's phenomenal in Cuba. I'm like, no. Nothing has changed for the Cuban people. Nothing has largely changed with the government other than an appreciation for, hey, let's get more money coming in by, trying to have more tourism. And I was very surprised because it is no secret that the Cuban Federation is the Cuban government. Mm-hmm. All that being said, it was great to have the concept that players were not going to be persecuted. Players didn't have to take drastic steps to leave Cuba in order to sign here. But I just thought that was pie in the sky. I thought that was a little too unrealistic, too much of a dream, really. It wasn't.
Do you think it's
realistic.
Still a dream?
I think so. I think, it's odd that for as long as people here have, especially who aren't Hispanic, have very idyllic view of Cuba. And I don't think they really appreciate the dictatorship and what's really gone on there. My grandfather had been imprisoned in Cuba. My mom's husband had been imprisoned in Cuba. There were so many, and that's still, as far as I know, that's still happening. Nothing has changed. Conditions really haven't changed. And I think until there is really a wholesale change in the government, and that's one reason why people are very scared about, Venezuela and what's going on in Venezuela. Until that happens, I don't think we're going to get a real clean way for Cuban players to come to the United States to play, unfortunately.
That's very unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad.
It's mind-blowing in a lot of ways. Like, you would just hope they could find a way to make it all work, but it's just
make it all
not
work,
easy.
right? If we could just get a magic wand and just make it happen. Bueno, Sylvia, La Esquina Caliente, where do you see this going?
Well, I had one of the things, as I said, I've been blessed, in addition to Ryan, I've been blessed by having so many friends of mine, as I mentioned, call me and say, hey, I got a player here, I got a player there, and which has been really amazing. And I've got a great group of resources around me. One of the things a lot of my friends ask me is, well, you're going to go to Latin America, right? And, get some Latin players. And that was my original thesis. I mean, my original reason for wanting to become an agent is because I felt it was, and it's best to say it in Spanish because it's so much more appropriate, una desgracia, for Latin players to really have, have agents with whom they can't communicate. And people whose first language is English do not appreciate what a difficult language it is. And you're also talking about, a lot of the Latin players have less education even than we do in the United States. So you combine those two things and it is so difficult. And for them to be able to, to have agents who don't speak Spanish and who don't really understand them and put their future in their hands is, I thought it was heart-wrenching. And so that's part of it. And I just actually recently went to the Dominican Republic.
Hey.
Exactly. It was, and you know what? One of the things is that I've been in baseball a long time, and the poverty that there is in the Dominican Republic intellectually. To be there for days and be on these fields, you can't appreciate it till you're really there. And I was with these kids on fields that we would never accept these fields in the United States. We'd be like, oh, hell no, game canceled, we're not playing on this. And they were playing in these conditions with dilapidated, a lot of their pants had rips and their cleats had holes and their gloves. There was actually a player, we were taking outfield, and the player muffed a ball, and I was talking with a friend of mine and we laughed. I said, oh, mira, este guante tiene un hueco, like a player, anytime they muff a ball, they're looking at the glove like, the glove did something wrong. And as a friend of mine liked to say, it's not the Indian, it's the arrow. And which I told him I was ripping off. I said, I love that, and I'm totally taking that. So I told him. But so unbeknownst to us, so a few minutes later, the player walks over to us. His glove is in two pieces. His glove was in two pieces. We were shocked. I've never even seen a glove. The only time I've ever seen a glove like that was when I went to the Rawlings factory when I worked at MLB, and they were sewing a glove. That's it. And so I came home, and it was so emotional for me. And I said, I just want to do so much for them. I need to send them stuff. I need to do all these things. And actually, I got on the phone with my mom, and she was on it. She's like, mira, los curas de aquí siempre van para allá. So she was on it with her local priest. She says, we're going to send them all this stuff. Where she was at Ross the next morning buying shirts.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And you're doing what you set out to do, because you said you wanted to change the world. And really, when you change the world is by impacting one life. So that's what you're doing.
Yeah. And the thing is also, I think another kind of lost sector of baseball, especially in the Dominican, is after the age of 17, players don't exist in the Dominican. I mean, they might as well be 50. They just don't. And one of the things that we're doing is really taking a look at some of these, 18, 19-year-olds that had, for usually not talent-related reasons. Usually it was something where they were doing, they're working with their families or something like that. They didn't get signed, and trying to get some of those players over to the United States so they can go to high school or junior college in the United States and they can get drafted.
Amazing. That's really one of the more important sides to what you're doing, is really focusing on the education and how important that lack of education, specifically in the Dominican Republic, and how that works out there. So if you are able to provide them with some sense of a plan B, right?
Yeah.
If they can get that, then they can do a lot more with their families, even if they don't make it to the big leagues, And it's something that I wish and I hope that Major League Baseball really, really does want to do out in the DR, because they do as much as they can, but I know that they could do a lot more.
Yeah, and I think also, there are often we rely, on the institutions, whether it's Major League Baseball, whether it's a Players Association, big groups to address people. And they have the financial resources to do it, but some of it is, they're going to be limited in who they know or who they can reach, because I think, while I would love to have those financial resources to help everybody, at least, to be able to try to reach individual people, it's kind of an all, everything gets passed on. For each person that can do something, they're going to go back and say, hey, you know what? I didn't end up making it playing, but I got to see the United States. I got some education that I wouldn't have otherwise have had, and kind of keep passing it back.
That's great. And I just got a comment on my phone that said she's motivated by you, listening to you and everything.
Aww.
So it's good.
I appreciate that.
That's great. Last question. On that trip to the DR, how many kids did you see try out? And how long were you over there for?
I was over there for about 4 days. We saw... because a friend of mine actually he's US based, but he has an academy in the DR. So it was a nice focused trip. We actually saw more players than we intended to, but I mean, oh my God, there were 2 shortstops that I was just like, can I take these home? I mean, it was just amazing. One was 16, one's gonna turn 17 in July, and they were just, and pitchers that, and you're not talking about guys that have access to the supplements that, nutritional supplements that we have here, really healthy eating, the physical training, the physical training that we have here. And they were just, it was amazing. So yeah, there may be, La Esquina Caliente may have a few more, players whose name ends in vowels or Z's.
That's awesome.
Sylvia, quickly, before we end, just what part of Jersey are you from?
I am actually, look, I correct people like this all the time. I'm from New York because I grew up in Staten Island. I went to college in Long Island. I live in Jersey now. But
okay.
I'm in northern Jersey.
All right, no, because I'm a Jersey girl too.
You are?
So
where?
yeah, Bergen County.
Me too. I'm in Ridgewood.
So we may be neighbors.
We
Paramus.
might be neighbors. Oh, you're kidding! I can spin on Paramus from my house. I'm right off Route 17.
Just
me
don't
too.
do that. Don't do that.
No. We're right. Look at this.
Yeah, so we are probably neighbors.
So when I'm driving around, my license plate is La Playa.
Oh, all right. So I'm gonna look for it. La Playa. Sylvia, thank you so much for being on with
Sylvia.
us.
Thank you.
Congratulations
Thank you,
for what you've done, and we're looking forward to see what you do in the future.
Thank you, guys. It was really fun.
And Sylvia, one last thing. When you're courting those kids, the 16 and 17-year-old, if you need a reference, we will tell you they will be blessed. So...
I like that. You guys need to send me the little snippet of that about how blessed they'll be.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Sylvia.
so much.
Adios.
Take care.